it would be interesting to start with the question of how did CLWR start? What was the sort of impetus behind it, and how long, maybe even how long have you been around as an organization?
Yeah, Canadian Lutheran World Relief began in 1946. It was post-World War II, and it was largely to receive refugees who were coming to Canada after war-torn Europe, and in large part Germany had been leveled, kind of thing. And so many Lutherans were coming here. In the first 15 or so years of our existence, about 50,000 people came to Canada as refugees through CLWR. And so that kind of work continues as well. We also were shipping commodities to war-torn Europe at that time as well. And so that's another part of the work that continues. How about yourself? How did PWRDF, where are the origins there?
It started with the Spring Hill mine disaster in Nova Scotia, and to this day, Nova Scotia PI is a very strong supporter of PWRDF. So it was a relief effort. The Anglican Church basically said, we need to respond to people who are in crisis here in our country, and so asked Anglicans in the whole country to do that. And then out of that, other relief type things happened overseas, and then we started to respond to that. And it wasn't, so that was over 50 years ago. We celebrated our 50th anniversary, I think 4 years ago it was. And so we've been around for that amount of time. In the 70s, late 70s, it was originally called the Primates World Relief Fund, and in the 70s the development got added in. So it moved from just doing relief work to looking at longer term development work overseas and some in Canada. We do some in Indigenous communities in Canada. And that's when actually it kind of blossomed as an organization, I think. Because before that, there was about 1 or 2 staff people from the National Church. And then once the development money was able to come from the government, more staffing happened. And so I actually, in May, when I was in Victoria for our youth council meeting, I stayed with the staff person who was on staff. I was billeted at their house before the meeting, and he said to me, so I was staff back in the 70s, and so how many staff are at PWRDF now? And I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I said, I think we're about 18 right now. And he's like, oh, and he's like looking really proud, and his wife was laughing, and she said, tell her why. And he's like, well, when I was staff, there were 2 of us. And so he was the person who actually took it to our General Synod to change it into the development work as well, and that brought in some government money, and it was able to grow from there. So it's an interesting history. So I learn it as I travel,
sure.
The history of my organization. So
Your title in the organization
is justgeneration.ca facilitator. Which
Okay.
really means nothing to most people, and including most of you who might even know me.
How does that fit into PWRDF?
Yeah, so the justgeneration.ca is the youth and young adult website for PWRDF, but it's also the title of the program that I run. So I'm the facilitator of that program. So I introduce myself, and then I say, I do the youth and young adult work for PWRDF, and everybody goes, oh, okay, that's what you do. So how does that fit into the organization? When we were posing questions back and forth in planning this, I thought, oh, this is an interesting question. So technically, I'll give you the answer, is I sit in the what is now called the CAP program, which is Canadian Anglican Partnership Program. So it's a newly developed program. It involves what used to be our public engagement team, the communications staff, and the connection staff. So the idea is that all of us, and the youth staff, to come together about how to engage Canadians around the work that we do as PWRDF. So one of the main pieces of my work is to engage young people in Canada around the work of PWRDF. And one of the major pieces that I have help in doing that is with a youth council. So it's a group of young people from across Canada. There's 2 members from each ecclesiastical province. That makes up 8 members. And then we have a member at large. We have a board, a youth member who sits on our board of directors that also sits on our youth council, so they are the liaison. And if anybody saw a big tall guy, Matt, who popped in yesterday, he's our board liaison. He lives here in Winnipeg. And then we have a number of other positions on the youth council. One is open to an ELCIC person. One is open to a development and peace, which is the Catholic version of our organizations. One is open to the ACIP, which is the Anglican Council of Indigenous People. They have a youth council. How many am I at? Did I get everybody? I think that's a. So it's a group of young people. When we're in full force, we're 14 people, and they gather twice a year, and they help direct the program that I run. So they help me dream up, brainstorm. Sometimes they write educational resources, come up with ideas for promoting our organization. They do speaking events. Part of that work is a bit of a leadership training. So every time we meet, we do something to learn about an issue that the organization is dealing with. So it's sort of, I think that the youth council is kind of like my foot still back in youth ministry, because I miss that work, direct hands-on work, but being with them, I still get a little bit of that. They're mostly young adults that work with me, but they're a really vital part of the program. Cool. And you don't have a youth council?
I don't have a youth council.
Yeah.
That's one of the differences in
Yeah.
terms of how the position fits in. My title, my role as Youth Engagement Coordinator for CLWR. It's a new position as of my arrival with the organization. The strategy was developed in the year or so before I came. The original intent in the strategy was also to have younger people represented on the board. So as of our last board meeting, or now 2 board meetings ago, in March, we have 2 people who are sort of late 20s, early 30s. I should mention that CLWR defines youth as 13 to 18 and young adult as 18 to 35. And we also are an organization that relates officially to the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, which is what all of the Lutherans in this room are a part of, as well as to Lutheran Church Canada. So CLWR is sort of a pan-Lutheran organization that way. And so we've got a young person who represents LCC on our board now, and a young person who represents ELCIC.
Okay.
Yeah, and my role as Youth Engagement Coordinator is part of the Community Relations team. So often I get asked, are you traveling anywhere exotic in the next one? Most of my travel is actually domestic, because I'm Community Relations, so I'm relating to our constituency base. I connect with primarily, and as best I can, youth leaders and young adult group leaders in Lutheran congregations across the country. And yeah, my work also connects well with our We Care program, which is our commodities program. So often there are youth groups and confirmation groups and other people who will go to our warehouse and volunteer there, and I'll meet up with them there as well.